gather round while we tell a story of the ages. Long ago, there was a time when there was this person who was working at a company, and people said, if you leave this company to go do something on your own, we will follow you wherever you go. And they meant it. And so, a company was started. Well, let's just fast forward, because about 7 founders later and company changes and gaining and losing investors, then finally I decided to go on a journey of my own and not follow all of the recommendations that were given to me. And I discovered there were these little tiny computers. These tiny computers that you could buy online, and you could ship them to people. and I thought to myself, I could skip having investors and start a whole company by just finding other people who already have things that they've made, and then hack it and turn it into a product of my own. And so I created the Pied Hacker Experience.
But it wasn't always called that.
Yeah.
That's what it is now. But the Pied Hacker Experience was something very different, like a couple years ago.
Yeah. And it's so weird to think back to, because as fast forwarded and fast tracked as that story was, at some point when I was running just a little e-commerce shop selling tiny computers and doing little courses, I was selling backpacks and like cables and accessories, and I was like, sweet, I have like a IT supply shop. That's what I ran. I ran an online IT supply shop, and I was like, I bet I could take these little tiny computers and make a course. And the point is that at some point I had been like running this, like trying to build this business by myself, after deciding that I didn't want to work with investors. I didn't want to kind of follow the standard conventional, like, this is how you start a business. This is a standard business model. These are all the exact things I hated it. I tried all the things. I worked with investors. And I grew up with investors. So when I talk about investors, it's not just my one experience and I was born and raised practically by investors. I've met hundreds of them. But when I was kind of following the path, and I was like, how can I figure out how to survive? And I remember seeing Laura, who I had met online, and I was like, oh, she's starting a business.
We didn't meet online, though. Let's clarify.
Yeah, we met in college. Yeah, we met like 10 years before we even started talking at the point that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But
before we reconnected.
Yeah.
We met in college.
We did.
Long ago. Long ago.
And I just remember I was trying to start a business, and I had done international business, and I'm all about international business. And she had been doing international business in the Netherlands, and I was like, yes, that's the only person I've met who does exactly what I like to do in my life.
Well, yeah, it's funny because I was essentially a freelancer at that point, but I moved to the Netherlands on the Dutch-American Friendship Treaty, which part of the stipulation of getting that visa is you have to start your own business in the Netherlands. And so I had already been kind of running my own freelance business, and so I moved it over there and started just doing what I was doing over there. And it worked out great. It supported me for the year that I lived there. But then I came back and was bumming around, and all of a sudden I heard from Nathan, who I hadn't seen in 8 years since college. And we just started talking about life and entrepreneurship. And
yeah. And at the time, when I started the business, I had enough money to I did have enough money to start the business, try to figure out what I wanted to do. But with all the things I wanted to do, I was at a point where I had all this funding and all this capital to really do something with it. But the thing I was scared of is like, oh my goodness, what if I like all this time goes by and I lose all of my money because I like couldn't even figure out what to do. Like,
Right.
and that was dreadful. and I remember talking to Laura. I remember messaging her. I was like, "How do you eat?" Because I was like, "How? Like, what do
Yeah,
you
I think
do?"
that was actually like one of the first messages you sent me. It was like, it was all through Facebook Messenger. Like, oh hey, like, how's it going? I saw that you were like living in the Netherlands or whatever, and I had actually at that point like kind of moved back, but. But still, it was just funny to like have this conversation with somebody of like, how do you eat? And I was kind of like, well, not very well. Like it's not easy. It's hard. Every day is like a struggle. But it was nice to connect with somebody on that level of like we're both trying to really like forge our own path in this world. I think that's really like what like attracted me to your message and not attracted, but it was like if you had just been some rando on Facebook, I never would have responded. But it was like I knew you from college, and I knew, you know, I saw that what you were doing in your super professional little like Facebook photo where you're so cute and like in your suit and like laughing, and I was like, Nathan, I remember Nathan, and yeah, like I want to talk to him about how life is and talk to somebody else who's trying to do something for themselves in this world.
Yeah, and I was like, there's got to be someone who I really like that I knew who like I can like talk to, who I already know, because it's like when you're trying to do something like start a business, you're changing your entire life, and it's kind of awkward talking to like strangers in the first place. I'm like and lo and behold, there was Laura. I was like, oh yes, I haven't talked to Laura in so long. It's time to like. I want to see like how are you doing things, and then the next thing you know, like we are both helping each other out in our own ways and stuff. But we have since gotten married and things. So
fast forwarding a lot.
So if we fast forward quite a bit, we'll let you know that. But it's so interesting because I remember when I was first I first figured out how to do international shipments when on like limited capital, and I was so excited. And I was like, oh sweet, I can work with a manufacturer and send people like these little tiny printed computers, like little Pi computers that work, and you can code and engineer with them just like with the real stuff, like at a company. And I had built this program called Fundamentals First. I was like, okay, so I'm gonna make this program called Fundamentals First and teach people how to do like create anything,
which is still a great concept, you know, like you got to start with the fundamentals.
Yeah. And like I remember being like, would you be willing to look at my program to see if it works? Like can you get through the whole thing? Are my directions, do they work? Which
of course to me I was like, oh my gosh, like he's actually asking me for my feedback on this thing. Like of course, send it to me and I'll tell you what I think. And you sent me not only an Orange Pi, which is like a Raspberry Pi but even more primitive.
Well, it was more powerful than the existing Raspberry Pi at the time. Guys, this is a long time. This is before the Raspberry Pi 4 existed.
Well, was it like that long ago? It was like 2018. December of 2018. But but you sent me like a backpack and a whole little kit. Like you kind of hooked it up, and I was pretty excited about it.
I sold anti-theft backpacks.
And I sat down and I did your course and I did it. I made it through. I configured the Orange Pi. I imaged a Linux operating system on it. I had never touched Linux before in my life before this moment and that experience. And I actually wait, hold on.
Oh my goodness.
I still have it.
Yes.
It's on my desk. We cleaned the office like
That's amazing.
We cleaned the office a couple weeks ago and I found it again. and I put it on my desk because it was kind of the beginning of our relationship.
And it was a guide on how to like engineer your own custom operating system.
I did it. It worked. It totally worked.
And after she completed that, I was like, "Will you marry me?" No. No.
And I had some feedback. Later, I remember I got back to you and I had taken a bunch of notes because that's kind of what I do is, you know, I take notes and give feedback. I'm an editor. That's what I do.
It's like the most epic headline. Copywriter and editor like builds custom operating system with zero experience. Zero coding experience or computer experience.
Well,
you imaged it and everything.
Computer experiences. Give me some credit.
Okay,
I did a lot of like HTML and like I've done some website building in the past. But still, I got through it, and it was totally doable, and I just followed the steps. And no, I don't. But there was still a lot of command line, and I had never done any command line coding in Linux operating system on an operating system that I put on an SD card and then crammed into this.
Yeah, you just like take this tiny thing and you're just like.
I was so proud of myself, and there's such a sense of like accomplishment when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I created a working operating system, and
with your own user interface,
with my own
GUI.
Yes.
Amazing.
So that was one of the earliest iterations of.
Oh man.
When before Pied Hacker, it was the precursor.
It was like fundamentals first. Like Pied Hacker, like that concept didn't even like exist.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, and at the time I was resistant against. I was like, I'm never going into cybersecurity again. I was like, I'm an IT company.
Yeah, it wasn't cybersecurity focused.
Yeah, I was like, I'm all IT.
I don't remember what were some of the other weeks of that you had outlined.
Oh man, like my branding back then, it was like tech road warriors, and it's like people working like people who work in technology who go remote and travel around the world, and it's like tech road warriors. But I came from cybersecurity, so everyone still came to my channel because I come from cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And it's like the thing I couldn't get away from. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't get it off me. It's like this hoodie. It's like I was trying to scrub it off of me. I was like, get the hacker sign off, get it off.
But it's printed on there. It's not going anywhere.
It's like a cursed brand like on my forehead.
It's like a blessing and a curse. It's not a curse.
It's okay. I accept it these days. Now I wear the hoodie and everything. I'm like, all right, I'm the commercials.
That's who
now.
I am.
I've subscribed to the basement. It's okay.
So
we don't even have a basement.
But ultimately, what made you decide that you want to embrace the cybersecurity side of who you are and what you've done, you know, your history as a professional, and take the business in that direction?
Honestly, it was talking to you. Because I remember, I was like, when I was a kid, I used to hack stuff, and because that's like a lot of my best memories is just like all these things I've hacked, which I'm not sharing those stories right now, but like at the end of the day, I'm like, it really hit me that I just really like to hack things, for better, for worse. And and then I was like, well, it's not like I'm doing anything illegal or anything, because it's like a lot, especially like I used to do a lot of vigilante work. I'll put it that way too. Like it's like a vigilante's going out and hunting people down who are trying to get away, and it's like, run, I've got you. No, that sounds terrible. But like legitimate manhunts and stuff, stuff like that is my background. Some of my background, and because that's something that runs so like thick in my history, and if anyone's watched some of like my heavier videos, you know what I'm talking about. It's so the cybersecurity side of things, there's a reason why I ended up here in the first place, is because all of my skills from how I was raised, how I grew up, and the things that make me like really who I am just prime me for the industry.
Yeah.
And talking to you, I'm like, oh, Yeah, like this, like I guess it's just like in my veins. I'm just like, it's just, I grew up playing with like fixing and tinkering with video game things and like modifying games and modding things, which is basically hacking. Like I didn't realize I was doing advanced networking, and so that's what got me like, okay, maybe I do just go back to the cybersecurity thing, but still I had no idea what I was going to do, so I was like, I'm just make YouTube videos and contract with people. So that's all I did for at the time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
When
We did try the security awareness program, which
right, there was the gap assessment. You did some webinars with that, but it just
did this gap assessment.
Yeah.
And
Well, your audience was
stick.
smaller then too, and it wasn't. I think the other thing about like growing a business is growing that audience and also figuring out what your audience wants.
That's true. I had to figure out like what are the things that make you guys tick that you're gonna be like, this is gonna actually make my day. Like,
yeah, because your input is a lot of what drives everything that we do, honestly.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
So I guess that's a nice transition into like the next part of our story. So we were using, well, before I came into the company, and you know when I test drove the Orange Pi, and then something happened, which was Raspberry Pi 4 came out.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the technology had changed.
And it all happened right when I changed my YouTube brand. I was not Ask NATO. My YouTube channel was just Nathan Riley. That's my name. Hi, I'm Nathan Riley. That's who I am. And I was like, okay, I need to come up with like some cool branding. Yeah, what's cool? And I was like, well, people ask me cybersecurity questions all the time, even though I'm trying to do this IT stuff. I was like, I know, I'll just be Ask NATO Riley. Ask me cybersecurity questions. And I read this book from Seth Godin. That book, I swear to goodness, that like Seth Godin book changed my life. Is called "This Is Marketing." You can't be seen until you learn how to see. I'm not even joking. That business transformed my business and my entire life. I don't know what else to say. Just read the book if you want to know what I mean. I can't say it any better way. Just
if you want to learn everything you need to know about marketing, read that book.
Yes. You can't be seen until you learn how to see. That statement on the title of that book is true.
It really is, yeah.
You have to learn how to see the people who are watching you and see what they're about and then serve. You have to learn how to serve people.
And you learned about that book through me.
I did.
Credit for that one.
It's because of you, and it's that book started the modern Ask NATO Riley brand. And from that day forward, like just immediately things started working. Everything just started working.
And it was funny because what happened was I heard him interviewed on a podcast, and the whole time I was listening to the podcast, I was just thinking about you and your business, and like at that point our relationship was starting to develop a little bit, and so I sent you this podcast.
I remember it. It's the best podcast ever.
And then everything just kind of,
Yeah.
That was kind of the beginning of something.
Yeah, and then I also finally actually got to go meet Seth Godin too. So
even better. Even better.
I have a lot of mentors. It's not the only person who I've learned a lot from.
But it was a very formative book for you.
Yeah. Yeah, for the time and what I was trying to do. And so the Raspberry Pi 4 came out right during that time frame, and I just immediately I looked at the specs of it, and then I looked at the specs of it, and then I was like, no, and then I looked at the specs, and then I went and looked at the electrical engineering map, and I was like, no way. But at the time, it wasn't completely tooled with pre-existing kernels for like fully tested 64-bit operations and all these things. But let me tell you, the thing that got my attention is that I used to use servers that had 2 cores and 4 gigabytes of RAM that were approximately as fast as the Raspberry Pi 4's cores, and we would cluster those together. 2 cores, 4 gigabytes of RAM, about the same speed on those cores. Data center, clustering, entire room. Be an entire room of these things, like rack mounted, like like a wall of computers that were all these things that aren't even as strong as this little tiny and I was like, no, no. I remember I was like, we had like I remember having some Core 2 Duo rack mounts too. Core 2 Duo, man, that's old school. And that wasn't even that was the end user chip, because we couldn't for one of the systems we were using. Anyways, it's a lot longer ago. I don't need to get into all that, but the Raspberry Pi 4 came out with 4 gigabytes of RAM, and it had 4 cores, and it was as powerful as these other things. And guys, I'm a hacker. One of the things I did as a kid is I just overclock things, and I remember I just try to overclock anything I could. I'm like, how much power can you get out of this? Like, maximize the cooling and the voltages and the temperatures, all that stuff. And I just got obsessed. And so then at that time, I was just like making YouTube videos and getting obsessed over this little crazy chip while trying to like work contracts. And the next thing I know, like this part is like I was teaching, and some of my students were like, oh, we want some opportunities for real world experiences. And I was already kind of trying to build something. I was like, well, maybe see what I can build with this. I was like, I can build something with this little Pi.
And this was last fall. When did the Raspberry Pi 4 come out? Like last summer or something?
Yeah, last summer. And at the time, I was approved to sell Orange Pis, but I wasn't approved to sell Raspberry Pis. But then the Raspberry Pi Corporation opened their trademark and all that stuff and set it to where anyone can build their business, and it just open hardware, open source.
Yeah.
And I just got from that moment forward, I was like, open source everything. So I was like, I'm gonna put all this open source everything on this open source platform
for our open source.
Oh code. Man, because that liberates you from licensing, where it's yeah, you don't have to maintain a Windows license or an OS 10 license. You can move it around to different hardware. You can make whatever software you want. You don't have to worry about expired software. You don't have to think about the annoying payment that someone stole your credit card, and then you got a new credit card, and then you forgot the 20 accounts that you need to change the card on. Just all these things you don't have to worry about when you get into the world of open source. You just build something of your own.
Wait, how does that solve? How is that open source?
Well, it's a benefit of open source is just not having to have like paying accounts and stuff necessarily to use things and like keep up with like
free. You don't have to.
Yeah, you don't have to pay your Office 365 account and then pay your Microsoft
it's free. You don't have
license
to worry about like updating your credit card. when your credit card gets stolen for real. Cybersecurity, guys. If everything you use is open source, then you don't have to. You won't have to worry about it.
As a business, it doesn't impact your bottom lines either. Quite literally.
This is why we're open source.
This is why we're open. There you go, science.
Science.
Open source for business
science.
I
see.
It's the best. I love it.
Anyway, you were talking to your students. You were teaching and talking to your students.
Yeah.
And they wanted real world experience. And then what?
So then it's like there were 3 students in particular. I was like, all right, well, how about I just try my best to see what I can come up with.
Yeah.
And, I let them know that it's like, this isn't something that I've done before. Like we'll just try. We'll just see what happens, huh? And we went through it, and the students were like, I'm interested to see if it goes somewhere. We could all agree that it got kind of sloppy and kind of messy. But
what was kind of like your vision? What were you hoping to achieve at that point? Did you have any sort of like goals for it when you were working with your first kind of initial round of students?
Actually, I hadn't even thought about it, but at the end of the day, the only real goal I had was I wanted to give them an experience, and I just didn't know how to provide that.
Like what sort of an experience? Like a pen testing sort? It was kind of a little bit like hacking, pen testing.
At the time, it was pen testing because everyone was like, "Well, I want to learn.
They wanted to learn how to pen test.
I want to learn how to hack things," and
because it's like the trendy cool thing to do.
Yeah, it's like hacking things, and I was like, "Well, okay. Well, let's see. Like, what can I do to create some sort of experience? And it was that, okay, so what we'll do is we'll create a tournament. And we'll try to see if we can get that tournament into Black Hat, which I was trying to build a tournament anyways. I was already trying to do that. But with the students, I was like, how about I give them an experience of helping build the tournament? And so I let them build it while I tried to figure out how to do something with it. And I went and learned how to like build little classrooms and stuff like that. And I didn't, I guess, inform the students, all of them, like where all the information in the classroom was. But it's a good learning experience. So I learned like, oh, I can build an actual experience using classroom resources and types of tools, and to kind of help keep people on track.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the experience, we end up with something that they created, they created themselves.
And then for that one, it was you did a tournament. You did an actual tournament.
Yeah, it was like a hacking battle royale or death match, where everyone gets connected to the same network, and then it's like, may the last pie standing win. Fight! No. And then it's like, finish him. Oh no, I was just thinking of Mortal Kombat. I love Mortal Kombat in martial arts. I used to do martial arts growing up and stuff. So, like tournaments, I used to do like tournament matches and like sword tournaments. So to me, it's I guess hacking kind of reminds me of a martial art in a way, because it's online warfare.
Yeah, it's like it takes finesse and like planning, and it's like you're kind of like a ninja. I don't know if martial arts have anything to do with being a ninja.
Well, martial arts are highly structured, and very structured, very organized, but they're dynamic.
Right.
So just because you follow one form, you have to learn how to make that form responsive and reactive, because obviously your opponent's not going to do the same thing every time, and the same thing applies to like cybersecurity. Hackers are going to come up with who knows what, and you have to be reactive. So to me, it's like a give and take. It's like a battle. It's like a dance. It's like a tango.
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing, though, is so you created this sort of experience for a select group of students at the time who had approached you and wanted to learn more.
Purely private, yeah.
Yeah.
And you were there.
Absolutely. And then it culminated in this tournament, which was awesome. And it was really cool to see how people took those skills that you had taught them and could actually then go and like hack each other.
Yeah. And the cool thing is people would take on types of defense and attack strategies well beyond what we gave the students. So some of them, like who are more advanced, were like, oh yeah, I'm gonna like create little like cycling,
it goes back to that concept of like fundamentals. Once you have those fundamentals, you can then like do so much more with the idea.
Yeah.
But also now I think you should talk a little bit about like where those students are now, even just so that was in December of 2019 that we did the tournament at that point.
Yeah.
And now those students are now doing.
It's so crazy because like one of the students in the middle of working together, like they ended up getting just like a job before we even finished working together. They had just had unlimited questions, and I'd just be like, they'd be like, question. I'd be like, okay, and they would question, and I just kept answering. Next thing I know, like we're doing this experience, we're not even done with the thing, and they're like, I got a job. Thank you so much for everything. I'm like, well, I've helped people get jobs for over a decade. I've gotten quite good at it, but not that good at it. And then the other ones who finished, they ended up figuring out like getting things. But one of them even, more than just getting a job, got to create their own job opportunity and own like job role because they made a portfolio with their own technology and got to show off their actual skills because they created a portfolio of their work, of their code, of their craft. And then, I was like, okay, so how about I build a community and start just kind of working with people, help people build things, help people build portfolios. And one by one, we had portfolio after portfolio, and person after person, they just started getting jobs that were paying, like people who had no experience getting jobs paying $50,000 a year. One of them just $80,000, or was it an 85,000? It doesn't matter. First cybersecurity gig, opening
Starting
salary,
out,
like come
yeah,
on.
that's amazing.
And you know,
It's like I feel like it's one of the only industries that you can really just start out and like, I don't know, maybe it wasn't an entry.
It's all social engineering,
but like that you can start out, you can come into that field. This is the first time you've ever worked in cybersecurity, but you have this amazing portfolio, and you can, you can speak the language, and you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's all that they really care about. And social engineering too. That's such a good point too, because I think if you can understand human nature and how people work, that's a huge part of cybersecurity, because
Absolutely.
like that's how you get hacked. That's a big part of how hacking works, is they know how to manipulate people to get the information that they need in order to, crack into your defenses. So as a person working in cybersecurity, you need to understand how that works just as well as the people that you're fighting against, essentially.
Absolutely. And in a video that I made recently, I commented that at the end of the day, cybersecurity, it's closer to a mental health field than it is a technical field, like, because we have
Absolutely.
IT and we have like software engineering, and you can be on the IT security side. There's info security and IT security. That's a thing in IT administration. That's kind of mixing the worlds.
Yeah.
And then there's also software engineering for cybersecurity. Like, okay, super technical, hardcore technical. But if we're talking about being an analyst or some of these other things, at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're watching human behaviors like an amoeba. That sounds crazy, but what that
Like
means
an
is...
amoeba. What do you mean by that?
Well, so you have to be technical enough to a threshold, but after you get like technical enough to basically do your job, then you just get these diminishing returns on getting more technical skills.
Okay, but how is
but
that like an amoeba?
I'm getting into it. I'm getting to it.
Okay.
So the technical skills, like, you have to have enough technical skills to be able to watch human behavior in the first place, right? And then when you get that far, where it is diminishing returns, then you can see human behavior like an all-seeing eye with the technology you've learned, and you watch basically, like, if you're watching a company, you're watching everyone at the company at once, all of the people at the company at the same time, like one giant organism. And that's what I mean. And like,
so the company itself is like this little amoeba.
yeah, the company is like an amoeba, and
It's like a single cell organism with no brain. It just functions.
Yes. And when you look at it that way, it's funny because people say one thing, but their actions say otherwise. The internet keeps people honest, not because people necessarily say things that are honest online, but because you can see their actual behaviors. And seeing people's behaviors is a much different thing from seeing like what they write in an email and what they claim they're going to do and what they claim they aren't going to do. And and so you just sit there and you watch this like mass of human. And I'll tell you this. Yes, the technical, because people are like, oh, but technical matters. Yes, technical matters. It might take 5 years to master something. It might take 10 years to master something. That's a long time. That's a lot of work getting technical. But it might quite literally take you 50 years to try to understand people, and you still don't understand people.
Absolutely, yeah.
It just takes like a lifetime and a half, or just, we can't live long enough to really understand people. It takes a lifetime just to understand yourself, practically.
It takes a lifetime to understand yourself. I agree with that phrase. But I don't think it takes a lifetime to understand people. I think you can understand people by observing human nature, by reading about human nature. You can understand people enough that you can sort of predict human behavior. I'll just say that.
It's more complicated than technology, though. Technology, I feel like you can still learn faster.
Well, technology has an answer. It's like there's always an answer.
Exactly.
With human behavior, there's not.
And
there's not always a right or wrong answer. So yes, I guess you're right. Like, it's something that can't necessarily be solved like an equation, but it can be predicted, and people are very predictable when you start to recognize the patterns within human behavior.
Right, and it still takes a lifetime to, like, just longer than trying to learn.
It takes time, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway,
The
so
technical
so
stuff.
like we were talking about before, everyone who all of the students who were your sort of initial cohort who kind of convinced you to create this program in the first place have all done very well. And then, so what happened next? So this was all in December, that the first kind of cohort concluded, and maybe those were like would those be like the alpha group, and then next you started working on like a beta group, and then kind of the pandemic hit, and how did that change things?
Well, it's funny because we had started trying out different things because I had this idea of this experience in the Pi, and so I had started a radio station, and the radio station I was going to have it like all about like things you can engineer, and you can use the Raspberry Pi to take on little challenges and stuff like that, and learn cybersecurity with the Raspberry Pi and this radio station. But the pandemic hit, and I'd been kind of testing out the tournament concept. I'd been doing challenges with this radio station, and all of a sudden, like, I couldn't afford the bandwidth to keep running the radio stream because the pandemic it hit pretty hard for a short spell.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, well, at the time I had so many contracts that I just kept working contracts. And then I was focused on trying to save customers who were having kind of trying to sink or float.
Right.
And
right.
so,
I mean, it hit everybody really hard at first. I mean, and a lot of people still are struggling.
Yeah, the pandemic.
But it was unexpected.
Yeah,
and sent a lot of people kind of reeling, and
it's cyber warfare.
and that too. I mean, cyber attacks have increased, I think, significantly. I mean, you can probably speak to that more than I can, but
yeah, just even just what we were working on.
Yeah,
just working on businesses trying to figure their stuff out, and help them figure out like what's going to keep this business afloat, or what's going to help this business survive this.
How can we change how we do business in order to accommodate this new
like rapidly
world that we're living in that's very much online and social distanced, and
yeah. And then at the time it hit me immediately that the Raspberry Pi provided a way for people to make their home safer, because what happened was all of a sudden companies were getting targeted with the home employees, the workers,
right, because so many people ended up working from home.
Yeah, and we'd built this tournament experience, we had been doing these challenges with this radio station, all of these things factored into something, and then finally at the pinnacle of it all, we're like, oh, the thing that'll help make homes more secure is you can build your own VPN, and the Raspberry Pi is an affordable tool that lets people do something to defend your home.
Yes.
Legitimately defend your home in ways that might not seem like it's doing a whole lot, but provides significant amounts of security for your home in these crazy times in the pandemic. And so I started building a SIEM platform, and started building code for it and testing it out and figuring out how to scale it. And the problem with SIEM technology, one of the things that got me into the Raspberry Pi 4 is that with the amount of power it had, it almost had enough power to build like a full-on SIEM. But in order to build a SIEM, and I used to work at a company called Logarithm, you need a lot of power, a lot of RAM, a lot of cores, a lot of these things. And in SIEM technology, it's security information event management technology for security. And it's basically like the macro of cybersecurity, like the all-seeing eye to watch everything going on your entire network so that you can be safe, and then automate defense and automate things to help keep you safe, and even automate things for convenience, because it's a supercomputer is what SIEM basically is. And I was like, okay, so basically need 2 Raspberry Pis, and I can make a SIEM technology work with how the Raspberry Pi works. But it was disappointing because the Pi didn't quite have 8 gigabytes of RAM to do everything I needed to do. But as I was working with people through this pandemic, and I was trying to figure out, like, maybe I could do a home SIM solution to help people protect their homes, help businesses protect their home workers, all that good stuff. And then all of a sudden, Raspberry Pi Foundation announces an 8 GB Raspberry Pi 4. I was like, got it. We
better.
Nailed it. We can now provide, like, either get 2 Raspberry Pis and build a cluster, or more than 2. We're using a 10 Pi cluster for our home security. Just if anyone wants to know, how many Pis do we cluster?
A lot.
Oh my gosh.
So many Pis.
So many Pis. And so then we have a 10 Pi cluster, and for anyone else, they just need 1 8 GB Pi or 2 4 GB Pis, or just cluster whatever you want. Or really, if you just want to build a SIM, you could use a laptop or a desktop. And at the time, we had transitioned fundamentals first into a new program called Pied Hacker, and we had called it the Job Simulator, and started retiring fundamentals first. And the Job Simulator was like, here are some basic role plays for, like, learning how cybersecurity works as an industry.
Yeah.
Real simple. And then people really got into this, the SIM platform on the Pi, and like LinkedIn started blowing up. Everything started blowing up.
Well, because it's something that is not typically readily available to the average consumer.
True.
And now it is, because you've created it and made it open source and made it available to the average person. So well, that's a big deal.
The thing about SIM is it's mostly skill, because you just it's learning how to take the technology around you and centralize it.
Yeah.
And basically create your own your own security invention. That's what SIM is. And when I worked in SIM, I would go and just basically fit AI onto a company like a glove. That's what you do. So basically, we sell people, like, fit cybersecurity technology onto your house like a glove. Like, make it custom fitted. That SIM,
exactly,
like, centralize it.
Yeah.
Build a security operations center, and there's a lot more to it, of course. But at the end of the day, like, it's the ultimate solution for someone to learn everything about cybersecurity. And with everyone getting so into the SIM thing, and then we already had this job simulator.
And home security, yeah.
And me already having a foundation from doing the online challenges on the YouTube channel, and having the tournament game that we had going for the Raspberry Pi, we realized that we had an open opportunity to create a genuine, authentic peak experience. And that,
the peak experience, yes.
Yeah. Around, like, look at what you are capable of creating. Here's how. Here's why. Here's the guidance. Here are the things that will allow you to invent. Here's how to innovate. Here's how. Here's how to expand your mind.
And then on top of that, we've also gamified it and made it just fun and enjoyable to complete while you're expanding your mind and having this peak experience. It's also going to be fun and enjoyable and doable.
Yeah, I mean, that's the fun, that's the joy of it all. Like, that's the best part. Like, how much better can it get? So, at the end of the day, like, we've put years of effort into bringing you this peak experience. Years literally.
And years.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we've provided years of free content, and for a change, we're going to charge money for something. But believe it or not, the years of free content will continue.
Yeah, I mean, most of what we put out there is free.
Yeah. But 90% of what we produce is free.
Pied Hacker, you know what? It's going to be so worth your time and your money and your investment, and you'll never be the same. It's like we said, it's peak experience.
Literally, scientifically, if you actually do the full peak experience and you actually do it and you complete it, scientifically, you can't come out the same person. It's not possible.
Yeah, if you're ready for a major life change, this is the way to do it.
That's right. And in another video, we talk about what a peak experience is. Check that out, and you can learn all about what we do to provide a peak experience. And We are just so excited to see you get started with everything. Basically, the way that the Pied Hacker experience works, just at a high level, is you start off with, we give you prerequisites for like, what are the things you need to know. A lot of it's stuff that's on my channel, and then some other recommendations. And so if you've been watching my channel, you're probably already ready for the prerequisites.
Up to speed for a lot of it, yeah.
Yeah. And then after that, you have 3 weeks of preparation for doing the official job in real life IRL role-playing game. It's basically what it is. And we give you 2 months if you want to get basically a stat sheet that we built, but you take it, you do the prerequisites, you do 3 weeks of that training. 3 weeks. The first week of the training before you kick off for the role-playing game is you learn about first principles, and you learn about the scientific method. Between weeks 1 and 2, you learn about those 2 things, and you learn how to apply them, and you learn about how to hack anything and why you can hack anything, how that works.
Some hardware basics, yeah.
Yeah, and there are actually some challenges in those early weeks, and then finally the 3rd week we kick off like, how does the game work, how does the role-playing experience come together, how do you complete the experience, how can you get what we are calling the Fundamental Security Architect certification. The real benefit of this certification, it's not one of those like accredited or well-known certifications, but what it does do is it guarantees that you have the aptitude to do the technical stuff that we say you have, and then we provide you a stat sheet showing what your skills look like. And so whatever skills we show on your little aptitude stat sheet that we produce for you, and you'll have to send
which will have 4 different areas of specialization, which
yeah. Exactly. It's you start off as an architect, they build on each other to build some architecture, and then you pen test the architecture, then you play as a malware analyst, and as a pen tester you have to build a payload. So ideally, the better the payload, the better the experience as a malware analyst. And then finally you take on the role as a data scientist or a SOC analyst, and get to see what that's all about. And we use the Raspberry Pi, and the Olympiad's foundational code is what we use to deliver the Pied Hacker experience with the Raspberry Pi. It is bring your own device, and so it does have 3 different challenges. It has a casual challenge mode for people just wanting to learn about security, build some security awareness. It has a standard mode for those who are like challengers, we're ready to go. You're trying to take on basically see if you can build some professional skills or do something a little more than just have a fun building experience. And then we have a hope for the hardcore mode for those who basically want to innovate and invent. And so whether you are a person who wants to push your limits and be an inventor, or a person who just wants to see if you've got what it takes to work in the industry, or simply just learn about cybersecurity and build maybe even a cybersecurity program for your own home to protect your smart home, just casual building at your own pace for fun. So that's what the experience is all about, and we're just really thankful for everyone's support along the way, and we can't wait for you to experience the experience.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming by, and yeah, it's been a long time coming, so we're excited to bring it to the public.
Go check out those prerequisites and get ready for the Pied Hacker experience. Thank you for watching. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Go invent something.